as we speak. So now the recording's underway. I want to introduce our speakers that will be speaking tonight. This webinar is being hosted by the Buckeye Environmental Network and the Ohio Brine Task Force, groups that have been involved in environmental issues for quite a number of years here in Ohio, trying to educate people about the dangers of environmental waste and making sure we educate people about environmental issues. So it's a group that has been very active and has been working on this issue for a number of years, especially here in Athens County. We've had everything from open pit mines, open pit wells to deep well injection wells. So we've experienced the whole gamut of it, and we appreciate all the support they've given us over the years as we've worked to try and help the regulations get better with ODNR, although our success has been very limited. One of our speakers tonight will be Roxanne Groff. She's a former Athens County Commissioner and Ames Township trustee. Roxanne is also a member of the Buckeye Environmental Network and had been involved in environmental issues for a number of years. Roxanne's a regular visitor to our meetings, helping us on environmental issues. So we're welcome, Roxanne. Next, we'll be hearing from Dr. Julie Weatherington-Rice, who is a certified professional geologist and a certified professional soil scientist. She has a BS in education and earth sciences, MS in geology, and a PhD in soil science, all from Ohio State University. In 1986, she was appointed by Governor Celeste to serve on the governor's Oil and Gas Regulatory Review Commission. She also worked at Bennett and Williams Environmental Consultants as a senior scientist. So she partners with communities to develop protection strategies, educational outreach programs, and spearheads cleanup efforts. And our third speaker this night is Silverio Caggiano. He's retired from the Youngstown Fire Department of 39 years as a firefighter, paramedic, lieutenant captain, and battalion chief. He spent 29 years as a hazmat team deputy chief, and he's an Ohio fire and hazmat instructor. He sits on the Ohio Hazardous Materials and WMD Technical Advisory Committee, which advises the governor, and is a member of the Board of Trustees of the Buckeye Environmental Network. So those are our speakers for the evening. And with that, Dr. Julie, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for coming this evening. I've been asked to talk about when we found out that oil and gas production brine was hazardous, toxic, and ultimately, excuse me, radioactive. I think it's really important to remember that we've been drilling for oil and gas in Ohio since 1860. And we basically thought that we were just bringing up salt water with the oil and gas. Now, oil and gas is a byproduct. For every barrel of oil you get 7 to 10 barrels of production brine. So we have to figure out what to do with this stuff. And what we started doing about 100 years ago is we started putting it on the roads because it was a good de-icer and it kept dust down, and we thought it was safe. And so that's what we did. Interestingly, if you talk to Justin Noble, who's been writing about this for about 5 years now in Rolling Stone and D-Smog, and he's got a book coming out. The industry knew that it was toxic and hazardous and radioactive, but they didn't tell anybody because nobody asked, and so that's where we were. About 1960, things changed dramatically in Ohio. There was an oil boom in Morrow County. It dribbled over to the county surrounding, but mostly Morrow County. And in those days, we didn't have very good rules and regulations about how we would drill for oil and gas. And so wildcatters came in. They were buying up family plots in the cemeteries. They were putting rigs in schoolyards. They were sticking them in front yards, in backyards. Somebody wanted to tear down the the statue in the middle of Mount Gilead and put a rig there. They dug brine pits to take the fluids as it was coming out. They were unlined. And that is actually a picture of one of the wells as it came in. It shot up just like what you would see in the movie Giant in Texas. And what happened was that these unlined brine pits contaminated the surface and groundwater. Nobody knew that was going to happen, but it did. Wayne Pettyjohn, who was teaching hydrogeology at OSU at the time, sent up students to study the problems. Couple master's theses came out of it. They published at least 3 journal articles and told everybody that there was a real problem. ODNR went ahead and ordered that the brine pits be closed, but they were unlined. We had brine coming down into Alum Creek in Morrow County, coming all the way down to Westerville here in Franklin County. And it was in their water supply. When people were watering their lawns, they were turning brown from all the salt in them. So the big problem was Alum Creek Reservoir got built, and so that diluted the surface water contamination. The big problem is that 60 years later, the groundwater is still contaminated up there, and that whole area is on a rural water association. So we're running farmsteads up there on piped in water because you can't use the groundwater 60 years later. It's still contaminated. Okay, next slide, please. So that was the 60s, and we knew we had problems. In the early 1980s, there was a saltwater injection well in Ashtabula County owned by Park, Ohio. And somehow the line from the full tank to the injection well broke, and the entire tank emptied out over the property of where the wells were, went under the road, and you can see a green pasture on your left-hand side. And that was Curtis Hill's sheep pasture. And he woke up one morning to see it flooded with brine from the saltwater injection well that had flooded the whole area. ODNR went up and in a matter of a few days had taken off all of the soils over the area of his sheep pasture and also around where it was contaminated at the injection well. This is before the days of secondary containment, so it just spread everywhere. It was a full tank. So they removed all the soils and they replanted everything, and they thought because they'd taken care of it very quickly that everything was going to be okay. And they tested Curtis Hill's well, and you can see his house up there. Everything was fine until a few weeks later, everything was not fine. And the chloride levels in Curtis Hill's well kept going up and up and up and up. And this was after the cleanup had taken part. I went up there in the summer of 86 and with Rick Simmers, who was with ODNR at that point in time. And we took samples every 6 inches down to 2 feet. And we found oil and gas brine in the soils below the area that had been taken care of. So clearly the remediation that DNR thought they had done was not adequate. And somehow it was moving into the groundwater far faster than any of us had any idea that was even possible. Eventually the plume moved off and Curtis Hill's well got a little healthier, although he never drank out of it before he finally passed away. At this point in time, the injection well is still there. It's now the H. Perry injection well. It's abandoned. Nothing works. The tanks are sitting there. The well is sitting there. It should have been closed up and plugged years ago, but nobody has done it. And so this is one of our orphaned and abandoned wells that sit in Ohio. But this really got people to thinking because it happened far faster than anybody thought it could. And we realized that there were transport mechanisms going on that we didn't have the science to explain. And we knew that it was toxic. We then had the Oil and Gas Regulatory Review Commission, and I had Jerry Poggi, who was an environmental toxicologist who was on loan to us here in Ohio while his wife was finishing her PhD at OSU. And we asked Jerry to do what would have been a very early risk assessment, where he made a list of everything everybody had ever found in an oil and gas brine, and then determined whether it was a mutagen, whether it caused cancer, whether it could kill you, whether it was toxic, whether it was hazardous, and made listings of all of these. It's a huge document. And that was really the first time we had a good look at what we were facing and realized that this was far more toxic and hazardous than we realized. Next slide, please. So ODNR decided that they wanted to ban the spreading of the brine because clearly we were dealing with contaminants that we shouldn't be putting out there. The big problem was BTEX, which is benzene, toluene, ethylbenzene, and xylene. But instead of being allowed to pass a bill through the House and Senate that would have stopped the spreading, this is, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, the Ohio legislature said, no, you can't prove it's really a hazard, but we'll require that townships and counties report when they're spreading. So they'll have to put in a report so we'll know where it's spread. In the 1990s, Mel Palmer, who was an ag engineer at OSU and also the extension person to the Ohio Department of Health for water and wastewater, lived on a county road in Township Road in Licking County, a little gravel road. And he and his neighbor came down with a rare form of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma that they were able to ascertain was caused by an environmental contaminant. Mel's son-in-law was working for the James Cancer Hospital here in Columbus at OSU, and they were able to figure out that it was possibly a heavy metals trigger. So Mel, being the consummate engineer and scientist and health person that he was, proceeded to test everything to see if he could find out where the metals were that they had been exposed to. He tested his well, he tested the stream, he tested his garden, he tested everywhere. Where he found it was in the dust next to his gravel road that had been sprayed with brine for years for dust control and ice control. And he and his neighbor were the two people that were out mowing their lawns and getting covered, on their tractors, getting covered with dust. And so they had been inhaling this and being exposed. He died before he was able to publish, but he made sure that everybody that was involved with oil and gas at that point knew about it, so that we knew that we had to keep pushing to stop the spreading. So in 2017, after a lot of lobbying on the part of citizens, including folks from the Ohio Brine Task Force, ODNR went ahead and tested their brines for radioactive materials. And you can only spread vertical wells, which are usually not finished in the shales. We knew that the shales were radioactive, but we thought that the vertical wells, which were in sandstone or limestone, were probably okay. Well, it turns out they're not. It turns out that they're every bit as hot as the horizontal wells are. And one is so hot that you would have to put it in a tank and hold it until as far in the future as it took for ice to melt off of central Ohio with the last glaciation. So you'd have to hold it for like 14,000 years before it would be safe to put on the road. But we're allowed to put it on the road. In 2019, we found out that they were using PFAS and PFOA in the drilling for the unconventional wells, but there's a real possibility that they've been used long enough that they're in the vertical wells as well. Last year, Representative Mary Lightbody introduced for the first time a bill banning the spreading of oil and gas brine on Ohio roads. She got one reading in lame duck as a sponsor, but we're going to be doing it again. So once we spread it, where does it go? Well, it comes off and it goes into the water, and it can go into the surface water, or it can go into groundwater, or it can go into the soils and leach onto the clay minerals. And once it's in the soils and the dust at the side of the road, it then either leaches on into water or it stays attached to the clay minerals and it becomes dust. So that's basically how we learned it was radioactive, how we learned it was hazardous, how we learned it was toxic, and what happens with it. Okay, I'm going on to the next person. I'm done. Thank you.
All right, Chief.
Like Dr. Rice, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us and listening to our presentation. I'm going to start with the radium end of this, which we're talking about. Radium was discovered by Madame Curie and her husband Pierre back in the 1890s. They also discovered one of its daughter elements, polonium. However, radium did not take the front stage until about the 1915s, 1916s, when they started utilizing it along with other gums and waters to illuminate radium dials on your watches and aircraft instruments and a few other things. It became famous due to the radium dial girls, and these women would paint the radium onto the dials so that your dials would glow. Go back. The process they would use, it was a process they were told to use, was in order to keep a nice sharp point. Occasionally, you would have to spin the brush in your mouth to get a point. Well, the major source, at least that we know of, is to get the radium into you is through ingestion and inhalation. And these people were directly ingesting this stuff. What we found about radium is it is a bone seeker. So it goes into the bones and it creates tumors. Coincidentally, a lot of the radium dial girls ended up with jaw cancer. One lady's jaw actually fell off. Madame Curie died of aplastic anemia, which is a disease that your bone marrow does not produce enough red blood cells. So we have identified the fact that radium attaches itself to bone. Your body sees radium as calcium, and as soon as you ingest it or inhale it or it gets into your system, it takes it right in and it deposits it into your bones. Next slide. The danger we have is that with the spreading of this radioactive contaminated brine, it has radium-226, radium-228. You have the ability to inhale this stuff. And a lot of these people that are spreading it don't know what it is, and they're actually ingesting it because they're not wearing proper PPE. I guarantee you the gentleman who is on that truck spreading the brine does not have the proper PPE to do the job. So there is the exposure to the people that put it in there. A company here in Ohio named Aqua Salina decided they were going to take some of this brine that came up from some of the vertical wells, and they were going to sell it as a de-icer called Aqua Salina. And they had all kind of claims, and they had all kind of ideas that this was supposed to be the end all be all. It was getting rid of waste. It was utilizing it. It was de-icing the roads, which is all said and good, all fine, except for the fact that you still have the radium-226 and the radium-228 in it. Where this comes from is it comes from underground in the shales, and it's uranium. And now uranium eventually breaks down after hundreds of thousands of years into radium, and then the radium breaks down into radon. And because we have all the shales here in the Northeast Ohio area and the eastern area, we have a lot of radon as well. Everybody, I think, knows that we worry about radon gas in our home. So that just is a byproduct, another one of the daughter products of radium. So when we started doing this, because it's an oil and gas product, it's not required to have a safety data sheet that you see there. Now, safety data sheets, to those of us in the hazmat world, are the end all be all. That tells us what you've got, how much of it you've got, what the dangers are, and we can research this and we could pretty much come up with a way of taking care of the problem. Because it's an oil and gas waste, nobody's required to carry these safety data sheets. They're not even required to tell you. And in fact, Aqua Salina was being sold out of Lowe's until Lowe's found out how radioactive and hot it is, and they removed it from their shelves. Dr. Stoltz out of Duquesne University has a jug of it, and he continues to monitor it periodically to see how much radon this thing offs. So it's a double hazard. Not only are you dealing with the radiums, the 226 to 228s, not only are you dealing with the potential of ingestion and inhalation of this stuff, but you're also dealing with the fact that this is coming home to you. Just try to picture, if you will, a person who bought a gallon of this stuff and spread it on his sidewalk and his road, driveway, and then took his pooch out and did its business, and it tracked around and then jumped on the kids when it came in and licked its paws and ingested some of the stuff off of it. And you kind of get a picture of how this starts to radiate out, and it starts to get into your life. And where the dog walks, the kids play on the carpet, and they're ingesting it. Kids put everything in their mouth. You can see where the danger of this product being allowed to exist comes in. Next slide. The next big danger comes to, and this is where I kind of jumped in, it comes to firefighters. Early on, when we started doing fracking here in the state of Ohio, the model legislation that came through was passed around by people that are part of Ben now and a few other agencies. And my hazmat chief called me in and he said, take a look at this bill. And it talked about everything but material safety data sheets, as they were called at that time. Now they're safety data sheets. There was no provision for us getting that information. And in fact, it was actually stated, this is secret. We can't tell you what's in it. Well, that's when I jumped down the rabbit hole. And as time went on, I found out just how bad could get. And that extended to any accidents that you would have, like you see in the picture there, of a hauler of the brine from these, not only traditional wells, but the wells that are coming out of the Utica and Marcellus shale play. They're not placarded, and there's no safety data sheets in them either. So here you have first responders getting onto the scene, and unless they are savvy to what's going on, they will walk themselves into this problem. And again, it's just salt water, right? And you don't know anything, and they'll track this back into their fire stations, and they'll bring it to their homes. And again, it starts to expand out to what it touches exponentially. The other thing is, as we're driving through the streets, the salt's getting on your cars. It's getting on the fire trucks. You come back to the station, one of the first things we always did when we got back from a fire was we cleaned the trucks. So now it's in the water. It's sitting on the apparatus floor that you got to squeegee down. Or you take your car to, let's say, a car wash during the winter. Got to get the salt off. You know, it's too cold in your garage. What most people don't understand is most car washes recycle their own water. So if somebody happened to have driven through a pool of this, irradiated de-icing stuff, you necessarily didn't have to have driven through this. It's now on your car. And as you walk by and you brush your car, or you brush the salt that's on the car that may have come from the brine, you again carry it into your home, and you got the white spot on your pants, so you throw your pants in the washing machine, and you throw the kids' pants in and your wife's pants in, and you wash all these pants. You're basically spreading this radium all over the place. And radium, as I said, attaches to the bones, but it's also bioaccumulative. So a little bit over a long period of time, once it gets in your body, it doesn't go anywhere. It stays there and attaches itself to the bones, so your bones. So it's not like getting a sunburn. You can go away and you don't get, you don't sit out in the sun. Once it's in there forever. It's not going anywhere. And the more you go through it, the more bioaccumulative it is. And that's important too, because those people that are spreading it, again, they're not wearing proper PPE. They don't have probably any idea what it is. And the headspace that you see there at the top of the yellow tanks, when they open those, or the blue tanks, when they open those up, they're getting a good whiff of radon, which itself is cancerous. It's a cancer-causing gas. So somebody somewhere who thought this was a great idea did not think this all through, because this is potentially a huge problem, and you don't even have to be around where the problems are to be exposed to it. You could get it from washing your car at a car wash. You can get it through driving through the road. If you happen to have your window open because it's a semi-nice sunny day, and you get the mist up into your car, or you get the mist into the filters in your car, you could be exposing yourself and your family for an extended period of time. So the dangers of it outweigh the benefits. Yeah, it'll melt the ice, but it may end up melting your bones just as well, or giving you cancer, or a variety of other maladies that you could come down with. And to give you an example of how prevalent this is, we're involved in a issue down in southern Ohio where they handle the filter socks that the horizontal, or the vertical wells, or horizontal frac wells, the injection well stuff is cleaned. And the strange part of that is, and this will sound familiar, a lot of them are complaining of teeth problems, jaw problems. Sounds like the radium dial girls, again. So nothing has changed. We've just created laws here in the state of Ohio that it's sort of like, like the Jedi mind trick, pay no attention to that radium that's on the roads. It's good for you. So we really have to take a long, hard look at what we're doing here and reassess what we're doing to the state of Ohio. This stuff, as Dr. Rice would say, gets into the soils and it stays there. And it bioaccumulates in anything that eats off of that or grows in it. And we consume that and it stays in us. So basically what we're doing by allowing this and using it as a de-icer, we're exposing ourselves needlessly to something that could end up killing us. And we're not alone. There are 13 other states that utilize this. So, this is something that's going to have to be evangelized out to them. This is not good, and we should not use it anymore.
Thank you, Chief. And thank you, Dr. Julie, for your remarks. I just want to remind everybody, if you joined us late and didn't put your name and county and any affiliations you might have in the chat, please do so we can make sure we get our connections together with everyone attending tonight. Also, there's going to be a link dropped in the chat for the Google documents that are being used in tonight's presentation for you to be able to access after this webinar. One of the things I wanted to talk about was we passed in 2020, the Board of County Commissioners in Athens County, a resolution opposing oil and gas brine spreading on public roads. One of the things to know is we've never done it here with our county engineer on our county roads. Also, ODOT does not use oil and gas brine on their roads. You know, ODOT's the one you see all the time with spreading and pre-treating the roads, and but they don't use oil and gas brine, which is significant. But with the fact that we, tried to have a bill introduced and it got one reading and then prohibiting this, there are lots of times when you get companies that will say, we've cleaned this and you can use it now and it's safe. And we've been told that before, and then only to find out that the risks are still there and the problems are still there. And we still have issues, especially when it comes to the radium. So it's important that we get the bill passed to ban the use of it, not just let it go through the back door in some cases where you get a company out there trying to develop a new technique to say it's safe to use. So that's one of the things that's important to get trustees and commissioners and city councils to recognize the issues related to this and get their voices heard at the State House. So Athens County has been on record for 3 years now saying that we don't want to see this done, and we'll continue to work to oppose that and work with that. And then with that, I want to bring Roxanne up and Roxanne talk about some other resolutions.
Thank you, Lenny. Great background information, everyone. Thank you so much. And thank everyone for joining us this evening. We geared this toward the County Commissioners Association of Ohio and the Township Trustees Association of Ohio, hoping some of our local elected officials would get on, would join us tonight and listen to some of the facts that we have found out over quite a number of years and pushed for change in the laws of the state of Ohio. And why it's important for local elected officials to know all of this is under Ohio statute, it's the county commissioners and the township trustees, the local elected officials, that pass resolutions that will allow the spreading of oil and gas waste known as brine. And as you heard earlier, people have thought for decades this stuff was benign because it was salt water. And yep, it sure kept some of the dust down in the summertime in the township roads. And to some of the townships, it was free. So it was a way for the oil and gas haulers or the brine haulers, instead of having to take it to an injection well, they would spread it on the roads. Well, now that we have found out that not only is oil and gas waste brine full of toxic and harmful chemicals, but the amount of radiation has come to light. And it's pretty scary, as you just heard some of the facts. So it is the people from our counties and townships that have approached their local elected officials. As a matter of fact, I saw Bill Lyons on tonight, and it was Bill Lyons who brought to the attention of the Franklin County Commissioners that they should take a hard look at what is in oil and gas waste brine. And they did that through their sanitary engineering department. And the sanitary engineering department of Franklin County, through making inquiries to state agencies like ODNR and ODH and EPA, they found out the facts that we had been learning over the past years about the amount of radiation content in oil and gas waste brine. We call it actually toxic radioactive waste. Takes that brine out of it, which makes you think of salt water. So the sanitary engineering department presented this information to the Franklin County commissioners, and the Franklin County commissioners, in fact, then in May of 2021, after their extensive research, or rather in July of 2021, they passed a resolution that would not allow the use of oil and gas waste brine in their county, either on their roads or on it can even be used on private properties, and it still would be the county commissioners who would approve that. So no longer does Franklin County allow the use of oil and gas waste brine. And in Trumbull County, or I'm sorry, in Trumbull Township, Ashtabula County, the township trustees in Trumbull Township, just as recently as October 2021, they also passed a resolution. They held a public hearing. They gave people the facts about oil and gas waste. They posted on their township trustee website all the documents that had been researched by ODNR and ODH. And those trustees, because they knew that there was a problem with the toxic radioactive waste out of oil and gas waste brine, they also passed a resolution that denied the use of oil and gas waste brine on their roads. So this is an example of how we have gone through the process of getting knowledge from our agencies, how we've used that information productively to get knowledge to our local elected officials. So the resolutions have been dropped in the chat, if I'm not mistaken, so you can actually see those resolutions. You can download them and copy them. And if you live in a township or a county that has not passed a resolution, it's a good idea to start thinking about doing it. And it's pretty easy to do. As you heard Lenny, our county commissioners were very receptive to citizens coming to them and asking them. And what this then ultimately can help us do, as another bill gets introduced into the Ohio General Assembly, hopefully by Representative Mary Lightbody, it will give the incentive to her to proceed with the bill, and it will give the rest of the legislators on the committee that is going to be hearing the bill and taking testimony on the bill, and hopefully will educate them some more. So the more of these resolutions that get passed by counties and townships, also helps us with our campaign to stop the use of oil and gas waste brine. So that's in a nutshell what the Ohio Brine Task Force has been doing through the Buckeye Environmental Network. And as you can see, the resolutions are up, and you can download them and use them in they're and all three of them are different. Athens County probably has the most information in it and is comprehensive. So there we go. That's what we're up to, and we hope you'll join us.
Thank you, Roxanne. If anybody has questions for any of our speakers, please put them in the chat. One of the things that we had one question, a message that came to me, if you need to, you can't get the link out of the chat because you're on a cell phone or some other way, make sure you drop your email in the chat, and we'll make sure we send you those links so that we get those done to people that need them and want to access them but can't get it out of the chat. So please do that. So if you have questions, put them in the chat. The first question that I'll kick out there that of interest, I think, to most everyone is what is happening in the other states around us when it comes to brine and use of brine? Is Ohio unique in the use of brine, or are there other states that are doing it? And what do we know from that aspect? Anybody that can answer that question would be great, very helpful. Roxanne?
I can start, and maybe Chief can fill in if he has some information he wants to share. There are about, as Chief mentioned, there's about 13 states who do use oil and gas waste on their roads, either as a de-icer or as a dust suppressant. And Pennsylvania has worked very hard in their legislature to ban the use of oil and gas waste brine. They have a very active group of folks, community rights groups, right to know groups, rights of nature groups that have been working with their legislators to try to ban the use of brine. It hasn't happened yet, but they do have a moratorium on it. So Pennsylvania right now is not spreading oil and gas waste. Also, what West Virginia did, excuse me, West Virginia didn't do an outright ban in their law, in their state law, but what they did is they require a disclosure of everything that is in oil and gas waste that could be used as a de-icer, a dust suppressant. Therefore, there is no oil and gas waste used for de-icing or dust suppressant in the entire state of West Virginia, because it would have to be, the chemicals would have to be disclosed and everybody would know what was in it. So those are two states that I know what they're working on and what they've done. There is a report, and I'm sorry that I did not give it to Anton to drop in the chat, but there is a report put out in the state of Colorado that talks about what different states have done or are trying to do. And the bottom line is that there are very few states, if any, doing testing of oil and gas waste. ODNR, our ODNR, Department of Natural Resources, started the testing of brine out of vertical injection wells and horizontal injection wells, because the citizens of Ohio have put up such a stink about it and asked for, the truth be known. And so the truth is now known in the state of Ohio, and we're just trying to help to get the word out that this stuff needs to not be used on our roads or anywhere outside of the wells themselves.
One of the things,
Anton, if we could go back to the map that had that one, great. Because this relates to the next question that I think is important to do as we talk about. Chief, you have something else you want to add to Roxanne?
yeah, one of the things that Pennsylvania has going for it is Pennsylvania has a division of environmental crimes that actually has attorneys and law enforcement people attached to it. So if this happened in Pennsylvania and people got hurt, they would be prosecuted for it. West Virginia had a very cute way of getting around it. It's like, yeah, we can use it. You just got to tell us what's in it, and that backed the oil and gas industry off of it. However, there are a consortium of states called the Northwest Snow Fighters Group, and they do use this. And you're looking at Oregon, you're looking at Montana, you're looking at some of these upper area states. And what they've got going for them that we don't have here in Ohio is they have large stretches of unoccupied areas. So a lot of people aren't really bitching about it because nobody's living there. In Ohio, we're fairly well populated. So, there is a large issue with spreading this stuff around and people becoming contaminated. I'm done.
We have actually 3 more questions. Starting first with Jamie from Columbus, Ohio. How does current injection wells compare to East Palestine in terms of volume of toxic waste? I don't know who wants to take that one. I'll read it again. How does current injection wells compare to East Palestine in terms of volume of toxic waste?
Injection wells and East Palestine have, the only thing that's common with them is that they both carry a lot of stuff. Injection wells, you're getting the PFOS, the PFOA, the radium-226, 228. You're catching a lot of other chemicals that they use in the fracking business. They're secret chemicals that, they're biotoxins, they're corrosives. It's a cornucopia. In fact, in a town hall that I attended down in East Palestine, someone asked a very similar question about how what was going on in East Palestine would affect an injection well, and pretty much everybody at the table laughed and said the injection wells would just laugh at what's going on because they're a little bit more toxic. However, what East Palestine has going for it that the injection wells don't is the possibility of dioxins. That you're not going to find those. I don't think you're going to find those in the injection wells, but they're both very toxic things. And you have, in both instances, you have the possibility that this stuff may find its way into the wells and the water columns and affect drinking water. And the bottom line, no matter what you say, in the United States, you have a right to clean air, clean water, and a safe place to live. Unfortunately, in East Palestine, they got robbed of all three. But the injection wells and the stuff that they want to do with spreading brine, it will slowly do it, whereas East Palestine had it done in 48 hours with their chemical experiment from hell.
So another question is, what kind of tracking as to amounts of radioactive brine in Ohio and other places? Who's keeping track of the contamination? Is anybody keeping track of the contamination?
No,
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 no.
No, no.
That answers that. All right,
probably we are.
next question. Isn't the oil and gas exception to disclose? Sorry, isn't the oil and gas exception to disclosure a federal policy? Can Pennsylvania laws supersede federal policy?
Good question.
According to the EPA, you can make laws more stringent. You can't make them any lax. However, through model legislation, the state of Ohio has made making those laws illegal. They've made it to even to the point where if you have people that have been hurt at a well incident, they can tell the doctor what you were exposed to, but the doctor can't tell you. And the problem in there, comes up. Let's say I've been exposed to some chemical in the fracking industry because I responded to a wellhead fire, and now I'm going to be disabled. Well, I'm probably not going to get a disability pension because the doctor cannot tell the pension bureau what I've been exposed to make me sick. So the way that PA got around it is they made their environmental crimes unit. And those people have the ability to investigate this stuff. And they've been doing some fairly good work. Here in Ohio, not so much.
And I would like to expound on that. We even have a law that says if you're taking the waste stream to a landfill, you're not allowed to tell the landfill what you've got. You just simply tell them it's solid waste. And so the people that are working at the landfill don't know what they're getting, don't know what they're exposed to. Leachate comes out of the landfill. It goes to the local public water, wastewater treatment plant. It's radioactive and full of heavy metals. The plant is unable to treat it, and it passes out of the wastewater treatment plant and goes into the streams. Pennsylvania has had terrible problems with this, and so has Ohio. But it is against the law to tell anybody that you're bringing in waste from oil and gas drilling.
I had a question DM to me. Oops. Why are there so many laws? Why are there so many laws in favor of oil and gas brine?
A very successful lobby.
Yeah, exactly. You took the words right out of my mouth, Lenny. It's not that it's so much in the support of just brine, it's support of the whole entire oil and gas industry. And when our legislators hear the words oil and gas, they hear and see dollar signs, money coming in, and that's all they think about. So they put up a wall between the truth and the money. So
An old friend of mine who was in politics said, and I quote, "Money is the mother's milk of politics." And these companies, they may not want to clean your ground up once they've contaminated it, like a certain rail company, but they have no problem with spending their money strategically to certain people and making sure that everything runs smooth. And they also have a fairly good lobbying group under the guise of the American Legislative Exchange Council.
Yeah.
Helps them create model legislations that they in turn give to the people that, they control, and these laws get enacted over and over and over again. And I've kind of broached the idea of, they have, the oil and gas industry has ALEC. We, the people and the environmentalists, need something called ELEC, the Environmental Legislative Exchange Committee.
Maybe we'll do that.
One more question, or if this one is quickly answered, we can maybe go to two. Couldn't citizens bring a class action lawsuit against the company that was trying to commodify oil and gas waste for selling this product illegally in Lowe's and other stores? They never got the go-ahead from ODNR to sell this stuff in stores. Can we get some clarification maybe from our moderators on what this means?
Well, they're not selling it there now. Remember, the law never got codified. So when the product did go up on the shelves, ODNR didn't say it was okay, but they also, the person who manufactures it interpreted as because he was allowed to manufacture it, that he was allowed to sell it. So I don't know if a class action suit could be filed or not. Someone would have to show harm, for one. Having bought the product and used it and was harmed by it would give it a lot more momentum. But it is not it's not on any shelf. It's not sold as a commodity anywhere. It is only sold in bulk, and it is still used, as Chief alluded to, it is still used in it's not used by the state of Ohio anymore. Our campaign to get them to stop using it was pretty effective, and they no longer use it, nor does, as it was mentioned, the Turnpike Commission, have a Turnpike Commission, but it is used in other places, and it is still being manufactured.
It's used by townships and villages and things like that still?
It could be. It's expensive. So it may not be used by it could be used by counties. It has been in the past, but it's an expensive product. So, and there are other products that are much, much cheaper and just as effective. So it's kind of working its way out of being used on the road systems here.
There's also no will to go after these individuals. The same person selling Aqua Salina was running Patriot Water Systems out of Warren, Ohio, and he was using their wastewater treatment plant to treat the brine that was coming up and de-radioify them and utilize them as a de-icer. What he basically ended up doing was pouring radium-226 and 228 right into the Mahoning River out of Warren. When they found that out, they issued a cease and desist. They shut the plant down, but he's still selling Aqua Salina, so I don't think he got hurt too bad by contaminating a navigable waterway of the Mahoning River. So, there just doesn't seem to be a will to go after these bad actors.
Yeah, and it can still be, it was brought up in the chat, it can still be used privately if someone is buying it in bulk. It's still sold as a bulk product.
Any other questions from the chat? We can probably do one more.
Oh, as an aside, if the state of Ohio would ban the use of oil and gas waste as a de-icer and dust suppressant, Aqua Salina would no longer be able to use oil and gas waste in their product. So it would eliminate the product.
Somebody said, I'm surprised that brine is expensive. Would think industry would sell it cheap. Yeah, that would make sense to me because they're just trying to get rid of a byproduct.
No, the Aqua Salina is expensive.
The Aqua Salina is expensive.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a differentiation between the Aqua Salina and the brine that's being spread on roadways. Is that
Aqua Salina is a manufactured product, and the person who manufactures it up in the Cleveland area takes oil and gas waste, the brine from his vertical wells, because that's the only thing Ohio allows, and puts it through a series of filtration systems to get out some of the heavier metals, but it doesn't get rid of the toxicity or the radium. It gets rid of no radium, as Chief mentioned earlier. All of the radium is still there, and ODNR has tested that product and found at the end of, from the beginning to the end, there is still the same amount of radium in the end as there is in the beginning, so. you're-
Wow.
With that, we're up against our time, and I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. A reminder that this webinar is going to be available on YouTube, Facebook, and the Buckeye Environmental Network's website. Contact information for all tonight's presenters is there on the slide. And with that, we're going to be sending out the slides and links to the slides and information that was talked about tonight after this webinar. So make sure everyone will be getting that. When you registered and give them your email, we'll have that. So you'll get that information as well. With that, thank you all for attending, and good night, everyone.
Thank you. Reach out to your county commissioners, everybody.
Bye.
Nice job, everybody. All right.
Here we are.
Here we are. I think you guys did a very, very nice job. I think.
How'd it sound, Jenny?
Yep.
You